The stranger who came to watch me die did not shiver when she crossed my threshold, and that was how I knew she was different. For years, no one had walked into the great hall of Cauldspire without their breath fogging white and their shoulders climbing to their ears. The cold that lived in my hall was not the honest cold of winter. It was the cold of the curse, and it went into people the way water goes into cloth soaking, patient, unkind. Servants who stayed too near me lost the feeling in their fingers. The wolves who had once slept at my feet had long since gone to the far kennels, where the frost was only frost. I sat at the head of a hall that had become a tomb, and I waited to finish dying, and I had made my peace with the waiting. Then the doors opened, and a woman came in out of the snow with a basket over her arm, and her breath did not fog at all. I remember the shape of her before I remember her face. Not tall, not grand. A brown cloak worn thin at the hem, a plain wool dress the color of oat bread. She stamped the snow from her boots on my frozen flagstones, and she looked around the vast dead hall, the guttered torches, the ice feathering up the walls, the long tables no one had eaten at in a season, and she did not look afraid. She looked, if anything, sorry. Sorry the way you are sorry for a house that has been left to go cold. I was told there was a dying man here, she said, who oughtn't die alone. My castellan, Aldous Roth, came forward from the shadows where he did most of his living now. The old lord keeps to the far chamber, he said smoothly, and he did not so much as glance at me on my dark chair, which told me exactly what he was about. Roth had been telling the countryside for 2 winters that the master of Cauldspire was a wasting old man near his end. It suited him. A wasting old man cannot rule, and cannot see what his castellan does with the granary and the tithes, and when at last the wasting old man dies, a clever castellan is very well placed indeed. He had hired watchers before, women from the villages who sat the death vigils of strangers for a few coins and a warm bed, half for the appearance of mercy, half in the plain hope that I would oblige him and go. None of them had lasted. The cold drove them out within a night or two, weeping and rubbing their hands and swearing the place was haunted, which it was in its way. I was the haunting. But this one set her basket down on my frozen table, as if she meant to stay. His hands, she said to Roth, are they cold? Cold as the grave, said Roth, and he almost smiled, because to him it was nearly a jest. Then that's where I'll start, she said. She crossed the hall toward me, and I want you to understand what that took, though she did not seem to feel it as effort. The nearer a body came to me, the deeper the curse gold cut. Strong men had faltered at 10 paces. She came all the way to my chair, and she knelt down in front of me on the ice-slick stone as if I were any old dying man in any old cottage, and she took my 2 hands in her 2 hands. And the cold that had lived behind my ribs since the night the curse fell, the cold I had stopped even numbing, the way you stop numbing a pain you have carried so long it has become the shape of you, flinched. Just flinched. As if, deep in some frozen room of me, it remembered that there was such a thing as warmth, and did not like being reminded. I had not spoken to another person in longer than I could rightly count. My voice came out of me like something dragged over gravel. "You'll freeze," I said. She looked up, and here at last is her face. Not beautiful the way the high-born brides Roth had once paraded before me were beautiful, all painted composure and appraising eyes. Her face was plain and open and had weather in it, and her eyes were the brown of good earth, and they were looking at me, not at a king, not at a purse, not at a way up in the world. At a man she thought was dying, whom she had decided ought not to be cold and alone while he did it. "I've sat with the dying since I was a girl," she said. "My mother did it, and her mother. In our village they call for us when the end is near, so that no soul crosses over with no hand to hold. I've held a great many cold hands." She chafed mine gently between her palms, and I felt it, the friction of skin on skin, a thing I had not been able to feel from another living creature in years. "Yours are the coldest I've met. But cold hands warm, if someone's willing to hold them long enough." "Not mine," I said. "Mine won't warm, there's a reason." "There's always a reason," she agreed, unbothered, and it's never one worth dying alone over. What's your name?" No one had asked me my name in so long that I nearly could not remember how to give it. "Severin," I said, and I did not add King because I saw no purpose in it, and because Roth was watching, and because for one strange moment I did not want to be a king to her. I wanted only to be a man whose hand she was holding. "Severin," she repeated, testing it, gentling it. "I'm Marin. I'll be sitting with you a while." Behind her, Roth's face did something complicated. He had expected her to last a night. He had expected the cold to send her fleeing like the others, and me to sink a little deeper toward the grave he was so patiently digging around me. He had not expected her to kneel there with my dead hands in her warm ones and show no sign at all of leaving. Neither had I. Let me tell you about the curse, since she could not, that first night, and since you will not understand what she did unless you know what she was up against. 3 winters before, the frost spirit of the high passes had come down to Cauldspire in a year of terrible cold and demanded a price. The passes were choked. The villages under my protection were starving between the drifts. The spirit offered me a bargain in its voice like cracking ice. "Give it the weakest of my people, the old, the sick, the small, the ones who would likely die anyway before spring. Deliver them up to the white, and it would open the passes and let the food and the thaw come through." I was a Lycan king. My wolf was a great gray thing, proud and strong, and my hall had been warm and loud and full. I had power the frost spirit respected, and I told it no. I told it I would sooner freeze in my own hall than hand it one child, one grandmother, one fevered boy. I told it to take the passes and the winter and be damned, and that my people and I would dig them out with our own hands or die trying. The frost spirit did not like no. Kings had bargained with it before. Kings always had a price. So it laid on me a curse shaped like a lesson, the way spirits love to do. "You would not give me the cold ones," it said. "So you shall be the cold one. Your warmth is mine now. Your fire will not hold. Your wolf will freeze in you. Your hall will go to ice, and you will die slowly at the heart of it, feeling every year of it, unless." There is always an unless. That is the cruelty of curses. They leave you a door and make sure you cannot reach the latch. "Unless someone gives you true warmth freely," it said, "asking nothing, wanting nothing, for no reward and no crown and no bargain of their own. A king's warmth is always bought. Everyone who comes to you comes for a price. Find me the one who comes for nothing, and I will let you go. You will not." And it laughed the way ice laughs when it splits a stone, and it went back up to its passes, and it left me freezing. It was right to laugh. It knew what I only learned slowly across 3 grinding years. Everyone who came to me came for something. The healers came for gold and fame, the one who thaws the frozen king. The witches came for favors. The bride's wrath had once brought me, before he understood that a dying king suited him better than a cured one, came for the crown and the hall and the name of queen. Every warm hand that reached for me reached with the other hand open behind its back. And the frost spirit's curse could taste that, the way you taste salt, and it held. Bought warmth is not true warmth. It slid off me like water off ice. Slowly the fires stopped holding. Slowly the frost climbed the walls. Slowly my great gray wolf, the truest part of me, the part that had told the frost spirit no with all its heart, froze inside me, until it stood in the center of my hall as a thing carved from ice. A wolf as tall as a man mid-stride, its head lifted, forever caught in the moment before a howl it would never finish. My own beast, turned to a statue at the heart of my kingdom. On the coldest nights I could feel it in my chest, that stillness, that stone silence where the warm animal used to be. I was a Lycan king with a frozen wolf. I was barely a man at all. Roth had watched it happen, and Roth had learned to profit from it. He was not the frost spirit's equal in cruelty, only in patience. He had merely to wait, and keep the countryside believing the master was a dying old lord and manage the accounts, and let the cold do his killing for him. That was the hall Marin walked into. That was the man whose hand she took. She thought she had come to sit a simple death vigil for a stranger. She had walked into the middle of a curse. and she was the only person in 3 years who had come to Cauldspire wanting nothing at all. She stayed that first night, and the cold did not drive her out. She built a fire in the great hearth, or tried to. I told her not to bother, the fires never held. She looked at me the way you look at a child who has decided a thing is impossible, and she built it anyway, coaxing and blowing and feeding it kindling from her own basket, and she got it to a good gold blaze. Then she came and sat by me and held my hands again, and we watched the fire. Within the hour, the frost began to eat it. I saw the moment she noticed, the flames going low and blue at the edges, the ice creeping back across the flagstones toward the hearth, the cold reaching in to smother the one warm thing in the room the way it smothered everything. Any of the others would have gathered their cloak and fled, muttering of haunts. Marin got up, and she fed the fire more wood, and she sat back down and she said, "Stubborn cold you've got." "It always wins," I said. "Fires always go out," she said. "That's not the same as the cold winning. You keep feeding a fire, it keeps burning for as long as you're willing to sit up with it. The trick isn't winning. The trick is being willing to sit up." I had been a king. I had commanded armies of wolves and held a hall against a frost spirit. And this plain woman from a village whose name I did not know had said a thing to me that went through me cleaner than any curse. The trick is being willing to sit up. "Why do you do this?" I asked her. "Sit with the dying, there's no fortune in it. Half of them can't even thank you, they don't know you're there." She was quiet a while, feeding the fire. "When I was small," she said, "my grandmother was dying and the whole village was too busy or too frightened to sit with her. Dying frightens people, they don't like to be near it. So it was just me, a girl of 8, holding her hand at the end. And she wasn't frightened at all because I was there. She squeezed my hand right at the last and she said, 'There now, I'm not alone, that's all I wanted.' And I thought that's such a small thing to want, not to be alone. And it costs me nothing to give it, so I've given it ever since." She looked at me across the firelight. "It costs me nothing, Severin, that's the whole of it. I'm not out anything by holding your hand, so I'll hold it. I'm not out anything, no price, no reward, no crown behind her back." I did not understand yet what that meant. But behind my ribs in the frozen room where my wolf stood carved in ice, something shifted for the first time in 3 years. A hairline crack, no more, running through the stone. I felt it the way you feel a thaw beginning underground before any water shows, a loosening, a rumor of spring. She sat up with me all that night, and the fire she fed did not go out. It got low, it got blue at the edges, the frost crept close. But every time it began to die she fed it and it came back. And by gray morning it was still burning, small and stubborn, the first fire that had lasted a whole night in my hall since the curse fell. I did not tell her that. I did not tell her anything. I only watched her tend it, this woman who wanted nothing, and I felt the crack in the ice of me lengthen by a hair. She stayed the next night, and the next, and the ones after that. Roth grew uneasy. I could see it in him, the way he watched her from the shadows, the way he began to invent reasons she should go. The old lord was too far gone, he said. There was no more use sitting with him. Surely she was needed elsewhere at some other deathbed. Marin heard him out with her level brown eyes and then said plainly that she'd go when the man she was sitting with either got better or crossed over and not before, and that she'd yet to see any sign of either. And she went on feeding the fire. She did more than feed the fire. She warmed my hands every night, chafing them between hers, tucking them under a blanket she'd brought, breathing on them like you would a child's cold fingers. She brought soup in a covered crock and coaxed me to take it, spoon by spoon, and it was the first food I had truly tasted in years. The curse had frozen even that, made everything ash, but under her patient hands I began faintly to taste again. Salt, warmth, the green of herbs, small things, enormous things. And she talked to me. Not the careful, frightened talk servants gave a cursed king, all my lord and lowered eyes. She talked to me the way she'd have talked to any dying man she was keeping company, about the weather in the passes, about the fox that lived under her mother's barn, about a wedding in her village and a feud over a boundary stone, and the way the light came through the trees on the road up to Cauldspire. Ordinary talk. Human talk. She talked to me as if I were a man and not a doom. "You listen like you've been starved of talk," she said one night. "I have," I said. "You've no idea." "Nobody comes up here, do they?" she said. Not a question. She'd seen the empty hall, the fled servants, the dark. "You've been alone in this cold a long time." 3 years, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said to another living soul in all that time. She reached over and warmed my hands again, and she didn't say anything comforting and false about it, and I loved her for that, though I did not yet have the word. She just held on, and let the 3 years be as long as they'd been and stayed. Here is the thing I noticed and could not explain. The cold was losing to her. Not all at once, but the fire she fed lasted longer each night before the frost even tried it. The ice on the walls near her chair began to bead and run. When she warmed my hands, the warmth stayed for an hour now after she let go, then 2, where before it had fled the instant she stopped. And in my chest, the frozen wolf, I could feel it. The crack in it had become a fissure, and the fissure had become a fault. And some nights, lying in the dark after she'd gone to her cot, I could have sworn I felt the ice of it groan, the way a frozen lake groans in the first warm nights of the year, when the thaw is coming and the whole white sheet of it is deciding whether to break. I began to want to live. That was the most dangerous thing that had happened to me in 3 years, more dangerous than any curse, and I knew it, and I could not stop it. A man resigned to dying is safe in his way. He has already let go of the rope. I had let go of the rope 3 years ago. And now this plain, warm woman had put it back into my frozen hands without either of us quite deciding she would, and I had gripped it, and I wanted, God help me, to climb. Roth saw it before I admitted it to myself. He saw me sitting straighter. He saw me eating. He saw the fire lasting and the frost retreating from around her chair, and he understood, cleverer than I gave him credit for, that the dying old lord he had been so patiently waiting out was not dying anymore. And that did not suit him at all. He tried to send her away. He did it while she was down at the kennels. She had taken to visiting my exiled wolves, the ones who'd fled the cold, carrying them scraps, and they had taken to her the way everything warm took to her. He came to me in the hall and stood over my chair and told me, low and reasonable, that the woman's presence was a disturbance, that the household could not run with a village death watcher underfoot, that he had paid her more than fairly and would send her home come morning with a good character and a full purse. All very smooth, all very final. 3 years of cold had made me slow, but something in me was thawing, and thawing things move. "You'll not send her anywhere," I said. Roth blinked. I don't think the old lord, the wasting, obliging, dying old lord of his invention, had ever refused him anything before. "My lord, the woman is a distraction from your rest." "My rest," I said, and I heard my own voice come back to me, the voice that had once told a frost spirit no, rough with disuse but rising, rising. "You mean my death, Roth. You've been managing my death like a harvest for 3 years, and it was going so well for you, and now it isn't, and that's what disturbs you. Not her, her warmth, because a warm king can see his own accounts." His face went the gray of a man who has felt the floor move. "You're not well, my lord. The cold has confused." "Get out of my hall," I said, "before I remember I'm a Lycan king and not a dying old lord. And find out whether there's enough wolf left in me to remind you." There wasn't. My wolf was ice. We both knew it, but he did not know how much the thaw had taken, and neither did I, and the bluff was enough. He got out. But I saw, as he went, the calculation reassemble behind his eyes, and I knew he was not finished. A man who has spent 3 years positioning himself to inherit a hall does not walk away because the corpse sat up. He simply changes his plan. When Marin came back up from the kennels, snow in her hair and a wolf pup's warmth still on her hands, I told her none of it. I only watched her cross my hall, the hall where near her chair a patch of the flagstones had gone dark and wet and bare, the frost driven clean off it, the first bare stone in 3 years, and I felt the fault line in the frozen wolf of my chest widen toward breaking, and I was suddenly terribly afraid. not of the curse, of losing her before it broke, of wrath, of the thaw coming too slow, and the winter taking her too. You look grim, she said, sitting, taking my hands. Warm, always warm. Bad afternoon. Marin, I said, there are things about this place you don't know. I know it's cursed, she said calmly, warming my fingers. I've known since the first night. Fires that won't hold, ice that grows toward warmth, a cold that goes into your bones. That's no natural cold, Severin. I've sat with a lot of dying and none of them froze the room. So it's a curse, and you're at the heart of it. She looked up at me, level as ever. I've been wondering when you'd tell me. I didn't like to press. Grief's got its own timing, and so has shame, and a curse is a bit of both. I stared at her. You knew and you stayed. Course I stayed, she said, as if I'd said something foolish. Cursed man, still oughtn't die alone. She squeezed my frozen hands. More than that, if I'm honest, I stopped thinking of it as a death watch some nights ago. I don't think you're dying anymore, Severin. I think you're coming back. And I find, she stopped and colored, plain woman that she was, unpracticed in this, I find I'd like to be here when you do. And the fault line in me broke. Not the curse, not yet. But something in me that had been frozen alongside my wolf, some door I shut 3 years ago along with all the rest, cracked and swung open, and I felt for this woman a warmth so sudden and so total that it frightened me, because it was the first heat that had come from inside me since the frost spirit stole all my warmth away. The curse had taken the warmth I could give. It had never been able to touch the warmth she made me feel. And that, I would understand very soon, was the whole trick of it, the door the frost spirit swore I'd never reach. But I didn't understand it yet. I only knew that I looked at her plain, weathered, warm face in the failing firelight, and I wanted to live so badly it was like drowning. Marin, I said, I have to tell you what I am, all of it, and you may not want to stay after. Try me, she said. I told her everything, the frost spirit at the passes, the bargain and my no. The curse and its terms, the warmth stolen, the fire that wouldn't hold, the wolf turned to ice. I pointed to the great frozen wolf statue at the heart of the hall, mid-stride, its howl caught forever in ice, and I told her that it was not a statue, that it was my own beast, the truest part of me, frozen where the whole hall could see it. That I was Severin, King of Cauldspire, and not a dying old lord at all. That wrath had made me a dying old lord in the mouths of the countryside, so that he could bury me at his leisure and take my hall. I told her the unless, the one door the frost spirit had left, true warmth, freely given, asking nothing, wanting nothing, for no reward and no crown. And I told her, my voice breaking on it, that in 3 years no such person had ever come, because everyone who comes to a king comes with a price, the healers for gold, the witches for favors, the brides for the crown, and the curse could taste the price on them and held. She listened to all of it without once letting go of my hands. And when I finished, when I told her I was a king and this was my hall and I had lied to her about being an old lord because I hadn't wanted, for once, to be anything but a man she was keeping company, she was quiet a long moment. Then she said, so that's what you meant, about being out something. You thought I came here with a price. Everyone does, I said. It's not your fault, it's how the world meets kings. Severin, she said, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard before, something close to laughter and close to tears both. I didn't know you were a king. I still don't rightly believe it. I came up a mountain in the snow to sit with a dying old man I'd never met for a few coins and a warm bed because someone oughtn't die alone. I've held your hands every night wanting nothing from you but for you to be warm and not frightened. I didn't want your crown. I didn't know you had one. She laughed wet-eyed. I still don't want it. What would I do with a crown? I want you not to be cold. And as she said it, I want you not to be cold. 3 years too warm for the frost spirit's certainty, offered by a woman who had come for nothing and had just learned there was a crown to be had, and still wanted only that I not be cold. The curse broke. I felt it go the way you feel a great weight lift that you'd carried so long you'd forgotten it was a weight. The cold behind my ribs, the frozen wolf, the stone silence, 3 years of ice, did not so much shatter as melt, all at once, A whole winter's thaw crammed into a single unbearable golden instant, and warmth poured back into me, my own warmth, the warmth the spirit had stolen, roaring back into every frozen room of me at once. My hands, my dead, grave-cold hands in her warm ones, flushed hot. She gasped and looked down at them, and I looked down too, and we watched the color come back into them, watched them go from the blue-white of the drowned to the plain pink of the living, watched steam rise faintly off my own skin in the cold air. In the center of the hall, the great frozen wolf groaned. The ice of it cracked from nose to tail with a sound like a lake breaking, and the frost sheeted off it, and beneath the ice was fur, gray and living and steaming. And my wolf, my true beast, 3 years frozen, lifted its living head and finished at last the howl it had been holding since the night I told the frost spirit no. It rang through the hall, through the whole hold, a wild, warm, living sound, and every wolf in the far kennels answered it, and I felt the beast settle back into me where it belonged, warm and rangy and mine, no longer stone. And the frost fled. It went out of the walls in runnels of meltwater. It went off the flagstones in a mist. The ice that had feathered the great windows for 3 winters slid down them in sheets and was gone, and gray morning light, real light, warm light, came pouring into a hall that had not seen it in 3 years. Somewhere in the walls, thawing, a bird began to sing. The fire in the great hearth, the small stubborn fire Marin had fed night after night, leapt up gold and enormous and held, threw its warmth all down the hall and did not go out and would not go out, because there was nothing left to make it. The household came running at the sound of the wolf. Servants who'd crept about the frozen hall like ghosts for 3 years, kitchen folk, the few loyal wolf keepers from the kennels. They came pouring in and stopped dead in the doorway, staring at the light and the meltwater and the living wolf and the king upright in his chair with color in his face and warm hands and a woman kneeling before him. And they knew, all of them at once, that the long winter of Cauldspire was over. And in the middle of them stood Aldous Roth, gray-faced, understanding in one ruined instant that the corpse he had waited 3 years to inherit was not going to die after all, was, in fact, a warm and living Lycan king who could now see everything Roth had done with the granary and the tithes and the truth. He turned to run. He did not get far. My wolf, my thawed and joyful wolf, was between him and the door before he'd taken 3 steps, and it did not touch him. I would not have that, not in the hour of my thaw. It only stood there, warm and enormous and grinning, and let him understand exactly how the accounting was going to go now. I would deal with Roth. There would be a reckoning, fair and cold-eyed and just, but not in that moment. In that moment I had eyes for only one thing. I looked down at the woman kneeling before me, my warm hands in her warm hands, and I saw her seeing it all, the thaw, the wolf, the light, the king she hadn't known she'd been nursing, and I saw her understand, too, that she had done it, that her warmth, given for nothing, wanting nothing, was the one warmth in the world the curse could not survive, that she was the door the frost spirit had swum I could never reach. And I understood something the spirit hadn't. It thought no one would ever come to a king for nothing. It was very nearly right, but it had never reckoned on a woman who didn't know he was a king at all, who'd have come up the mountain the same for a pauper, for a stranger, for anyone at all who oughtn't die alone. The spirit had guarded against everyone who wanted a crown. It had never thought to guard against someone who simply didn't care that there was one. Here is the part I want to tell most carefully, because it is the part that matters, and because it is the part a lesser king would have gotten wrong. I did not in that first warm hour take her hand and name her queen before the household. I wanted to. My whole thawed heart wanted to. But I made myself remember what she had just said minutes ago before she'd known any of it. I didn't want your crown. I didn't know you had one. She had come for a dying man. She had not come for a king, and she had not come for a throne, and I would not now spring one on her like a trap, and turn the truest thing that had ever happened to me into just another bargain. The very thing the frost spirit had sworn was the only way anyone ever came to a king. If I claimed her in the flush of the moment before all these starring people, she might feel she could not refuse, and then I would have bought her too, in a way, with gratitude and grandeur and the weight of a whole household watching. And bought warmth. I had learned better than any man alive, is not true warmth. So I did the opposite. I stood on my own warm legs for the first time in 3 years, and I drew her up to stand with me, and I turned so the household could see, and I let go of her hands. I opened my own hands, empty, palms up, and I held them out to her, and I said so that everyone could hear it. Marin of the Hearth Keepers, you came up my mountain to sit with a dying stranger wanting nothing, and you gave me back my life without ever asking for a thing. I owe you everything, and because I owe you everything, I will hold you to nothing. You came for a dying man, not a crown. You are free to go home to your village with my thanks and my fortune and my wolves to guard your road and live warm and easy all your days and never think of this cold hall again. There is no debt. There is no bargain. My hands are open. I am asking you for nothing. The hall was very quiet. My wolf watched. The fire burned. But I said, and my voice was not quite steady, king or no king, if you should ever want freely for nothing the way you do all things to stay, to be here when I come back the rest of the way, to keep company with a man who is done with dying and would very much like to learn how to live and can think of no one on this earth he would rather learn it beside, then my hands are open for that too. Not to hold you, to be held if you choose it. The choosing is yours. It was always going to be yours. That's the whole reason it worked. And Marin, plain, warm, unafraid Marin, who had held 100 cold hands and asked nothing of any of them, looked at my open, empty hands and looked at my face, and she did the thing the frost spirit could never have imagined and could never have stopped. She reached out freely, wanting nothing, and she closed her own warm hands around mine. I told you, she said, and now she was laughing and crying both, and so I found was I'd like to be here when you come back, crown or no crown, that never was the part I cared about. She squeezed my hands, warm and warm. I only ever wanted you not to be cold. I'm not cold, I said. Marin, for the first time in 3 years I'm warm. And the whole thawed hall of Cauldspire, meltwater running gold in the new light, the wolves singing in the kennels, the fire roaring and holding and never once going out, seemed to me the warmest place in all the world. The frost spirit never troubled Cauldspire again. Perhaps it was ashamed. Perhaps a spirit that stakes a curse on the certainty that no one comes for nothing and loses, does not care to show its face where it was proven wrong. The passes stayed open. The villages under my protection never again went hungry between the drifts, because I saw to it myself, with my own warm hands and my own living wolf, that no old grandmother or fevered boy was ever again a price to be bargained. Roth got his reckoning, a fair one, cold-eyed and just, the granary set right and the tithes returned, and the man himself sent down the mountain with far less than he'd schemed to gain. I did not freeze him. I of all men was done with freezing anyone. And Marin stayed. She never did take much to the crown. She wore it when the hall required it and set it aside gladly when it didn't, and she was, the household agreed, the least queenly queen ever to warm a throne and the most beloved. She went on doing the thing she had always done, for that was who she was, and I would no more have changed it than changed the color of her eyes. When a soul was dying anywhere in the hold of Cauldspire, high or low, in the great hall or the meanest cottage, word came to the queen, and the queen went and sat with them, and held their cold hands in her warm ones so that none of my people ever again crossed over alone. And more often than not in the later years she did not go alone either. I went with her, a Lycan king and his queen, sitting up through the night at some ordinary deathbed, feeding a small fire, holding cold hands warm, being willing, as she had taught me, simply to sit up. I asked her once on such a night, an old woman sleeping her last sleep peaceful between us, why she thought it had worked when nothing else could. All the healers, all the witches, all the cures. She thought about it, feeding the fire. Because I wasn't trying to cure you, she said at last. I never once tried to break your curse, Severin. I didn't even know it was a curse when I started. I just wanted your hands warm. That's all warmth is, I think. It isn't a cure you aim at somebody. It's just you have some, and they're cold, and you're not out anything by sharing it, so you share it. She smiled at me across the small gold fire. The frost spirit thought a king was too grand a thing for anyone to warm for free. But you were never too grand for me. You were just cold, and I had warmth to spare. I took her hand, my warm hand, her warm hand, the two of us and a dying stranger and a small fire that would not go out. And I understood that the frost spirit, in all its ancient cruelty, had never known the one thing this plain woman had known since she was a girl of 8 at her grandmother's bedside. It is such a small thing to want, not to be cold, not to be alone. And it costs nothing at all to give. The old woman between us slept on, warm, unafraid, not alone. The fire held. My wolf dozed by the hearth. And the warmth that the frost spirit had once stolen out of me, the warmth Marin had given back for nothing on a cold mountain 3 winters gone, I felt it move through me toward that dying stranger's cold hand and out into the world, and I thought, there, that's what it was always for. The warmth had somewhere to go now. It always would.